So I've been doing Zulisy optic reviews on this channel pretty much ever since the company started. One of those optics that I reviewed was the Zulisy Otter, and this was the red dot version. A few months later, they brought the optic back out, but this time it was in a green dot version. Well, now Zulisy just released the Otter Pro. So let's head over to the other bench and talk about the differences between the original Otter and the new Otter Pro. Alright, here is our Otter Pro. Let's get some quick specs out of the way here real quick. The overall length on this is 1.63 inches. The overall height on this is 1.04 inches. And your width is 1.12 inches. And the Otter Pro only weighs 1.21 ounces. Now, the only difference between the original Otter and the Otter Pro is this has a multi-reticle system. So this has a 2 MOA green dot. They also have this Otter Pro in a red version. Now the camera is not going to be able to pick this up, but this is the 36 MOA circle without the dot. And you also have the option to run the 2 MOA dot with the 36 MOA circle. I will bring a picture of the reticle up on the screen so you can see what the multi-reticle system looks like. Now I've got it back on just the dot, and I can't believe that I'm going to say this, but I've got it turned all the way up, and this thing is just too bright. Normally I'm complaining that dots aren't bright enough, but there is no way that I would be able to run this all the way up. So I am getting a little bit of starbursting. That's not the dot's fault, that's me. I have astigmatism. Now I've got it turned down on 6, and I'm not hardly getting any starbursting at all. But this set on 6 is like a lot of other dots turned all the way up. This is pretty awesome. Now your brightness level adjustments are here on this side. You've got your plus button here at the top, your minus button at the bottom. This does have 10 brightness settings. You've got 8 daytime settings and 2 NV settings. And if you want to change between the different reticles, you're going to hold the plus button down. Takes about 3 to 4 seconds, and it will cycle through the dot, or just the circle, or the circle and the dot together. Now, if we go to this side, it does have a side load battery. It does run on a CR1632 battery. This does have shake awake, and we will test that here in this video. And this does have a 50,000 hour runtime. Obviously, that's going to be on the lowest setting. Now the Otter Pro does have the RMSC footprint. One other nice touch on this optic is that it does have a backup iron sight built into it, so if your dot goes down, then you will be able to use the built-in rear sight with the front sight on your gun. Now the Otter Pro does have an aluminum housing. It does have an IPX7 waterproof rating, which is excellent. The window size on this is 16 by 21 millimeters. And it does have a coated lens. Now, one thing I'd always like to do when we're doing the unboxing in these review videos is check the windage and elevation to see how audible and tactile the clicks are. Now, the adjustments on this are 1 MOA per click, and you do get 45 MOA of total travel on your windage and on your elevation. Let's check the windage first. Okay, they are tactile. A little audible. Let's check the elevation. Yeah, you can feel in between the clicks. It's not the best that I've seen on optics, but it's not bad. And I can say one thing, out of all of the Zulisy optics that I've reviewed on the channel, I have never had one lose zero. So I'm not concerned about it at all. But just keep in mind that they are not as tactile and audible as some of the other optics I've tested here on the channel. All right, I'm going to go get this mounted up on our test gun, and I will see you guys out at the range. Now, the first thing I did when I got to the range, I put a 15-yard zero on the Otter Pro, and I set up some USPSA targets and a couple pieces of steel, and I started getting a feel for the optic. All right, we had all our hits on steel. Wow, this is really nice. All alphas. And our next target, we've got all alphas. And we've got all our hits on steel. Now, just like every other Zulisy optic I've tested on the channel, the glass is nice and clear. And like I said back in the studio, the green emitter on this is insanely bright. Whether you have it on just the dot and circle, or just the circle. And even though it was a pretty bright sunny day out, I turned the brightness level down to about 6 or 7, and that was all I needed for the conditions I was shooting in. All right, I struggled a little bit using the dot and the circle. We did have one miss over here on this piece of steel. All right, our next target, we've got all alphas. And our next target, we've got all alphas, 1 Charlie. And we've got all our hits on steel. Now, as far as the dot itself goes, it is a really nice, crisp dot, and I was getting very little to zero starbursting with the dot, and a lot of that has to do with the fact it's a green dot and not a red dot. With my astigmatism, green definitely starbursts a lot less for me than a red dot. Now, after I got done shooting the USPSA and the steel targets, I decided to move on to shooting some 10-shot groups like we do in all the other optic review videos, and that's when things went bad. All right, our dot just died. Okay, we got lucky. It just turned out to be a bad battery. Now, that was the battery that came with the dot. I swapped it out. I put an energizer in it. Let's go back to shooting our last 10-shot group. And it's gone again. All right, wasn't a battery. So this dot is just shot. Now, I was a little disappointed because out of all the Zulisy optics we've tested on this channel, and we've pretty much tested every optic they have out, we have never had one fail. Now, I contacted Zulisy through Instagram because that's how I do all my communicating with them, and I let them know that the dot had failed. Their response was the first batch of these Otter Pros that they got in, they all ended up having a defective battery compartment door, and that they would send out a new one right away. And now we have the new optic mounted on the Gerson MCP35 op. And yes, I know my fiber optic front sight is missing on this again. I cannot keep one on this gun for the life of me. Now, as soon as I got back to the range, obviously I had to put a 15-yard zero back on this optic, and I went back to shooting 10-shot groups. And after I shot a couple 10-shot groups, I went back to racking the slide with the optic on the tailgate of my truck, and this time it did not fail. Now, as far as the customer service went, getting this optic replaced, I was very pleased. It only took 3 or 4 days for the new optic to show up. Now, obviously, in my case, I do reviews for Zulisy all the time, and I cannot say what it would be like if this would have happened to you, if you would have bought this optic and it failed. I would like to think that they would take care of it right away, just like they did for me. But like I said, this is the first optic I've had from them fail, and being that I do reviews for them, they did make sure to get a new one out to me right away. If you have had issues with any of the Zulisy optics and you're watching this video, let me know in the comments how customer service goes for someone who is not a content creator that does reviews for this company. Now let's start talking about the pros and cons of this optic, and we'll start with the cons first because honestly I only have the one con, and that is the fact that the dot failed. And even though they replaced the dot right away, the customer service was awesome. It's just the fact that I've got to take the broken dot off the slide, put the new one on, take it back to the range, get it re-zeroed, and start the review process over again. So it was just kind of a pain in the ass for me. Now let's start talking about the pros with the Otter Pro. I was already a big fan of the original Otter. I have the red dot version and the green dot version. But the big plus with this one is the fact that it has the multi-reticle system. Now myself personally, I really don't care about multi-reticle. I just prefer to use a dot, but there are a lot of people out there who prefer to use the dot and the circle or just the circle. And now with the Otter Pro, you have that option, which is super cool. One other pro that I really like with this optic is the fact that it does have the backup built-in iron sight on the dot. And if I still had my fiber optic front sight, I am able to use the rear sight with the front fiber optic sight if the dot goes down. We already talked about how bright the green emitter is with this dot. It's insanely bright and getting very little starbursting. So no complaints when it comes to the dot itself or the dot in the circle or the circle. The dot stayed nice and tight on the slide on the very first day of filming and the second day after we replaced the broken dot with the new dot. So no issues with the dot coming loose on the slide. Just make sure you use blue Loctite and 15-inch pounds and you are good to go. The other awesome feature on this is obviously it has the side load battery compartment, and with a lot of the older RMSC footprint dots, you had to take the dot off to replace the battery because it was a bottom load battery. Not the case with the Otter Pro. Now even though the dot failed, we had no issues with losing zero on this dot. And that goes with the one that broke and with the new one that we have on here now. And the other thing that I really like on this optic is the button design on this. They are recessed in just a little bit, and they are very tactile and audible when you're adjusting the brightness level up and down. Big fan of the buttons on this. Now I had a little over 100 rounds racked up on the optic by the time I did the intro and the B-roll, shooting the USPSA and steel targets, and then it obviously failed while we were shooting the 10-shot groups. When we got the new optic on, I did want to rack up another 200 to 250 rounds on it just to make sure that it was going to hold up, and it did. And I am also happy to say that the shake awake on this optic works great. I did not test it until after I got back home from the range, because I just think it's a better test to test the shake awake after you have 200 to 250 rounds racked up on the optic, since it's been sitting there going back and forth on the slide all day. And as far as all the other Zulisy optics I've tested on the channel, I've never had the shake awake fail on one yet. So at the end of the day, do I recommend the Otter Pro? I will say yes, I still recommend it even though the first dot failed. Things happen with these dots. They are electronic, they're obviously made in China, and every once in a while you're going to get one that fails. And I cannot complain about the customer service. Like I said, they got a new one out to me right away, and this one is working just fine. Now, I will say this. If you are like me and you don't care about the multi-reticle system and you're just happy with the dot, then just go ahead and get the Otter, because it is a little bit cheaper than the Otter Pro. But if you do want the multi-reticle system, well, now you have the option to get that multi-reticle system. But all in all, Zulisy has been a great company to work with. I have been working with them ever since they started. And like I said, out of all the optics that I've tested for them, this is the first one that has ever failed. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.